Welcome to the Dream Life is Real Life podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Hermanson. I know it might seem cheesy or cliche, but if you've got a sleeping giant inside of you, or you just feel like you're made for more, then there's no coincidence you landed here on the Dream Life is Real Life podcast. Listen, as a girl from small town Wisconsin who decided to go all in to her dream life vision, I know how crazy it can feel to chase after wild ideas. Since leaving my 9-to-5 job in academics back in 2015 to becoming a yoga teacher, a life coach, and now a digital nomad, currently living in Merida, Mexico with my husband and Labradoodle, I know that all the cheesy cliches are true. I've watched a lot of my dream life become my real life right in front of my eyes. Oh, and I've learned a whole lot about sales, business, and marketing along the way, and I want to share all of that with you. So here, you can consider me your friend and mentor. As a certified business coach, success trainer, international speaker, author, and copywriter, I've helped hundreds of coaches and entrepreneurs build, scale, and enjoy their online businesses. So here on the show, you'll find the real people, concrete tactics, and weekly motivation and inspiration to make your dream life your real life. I'm going to let you into the nooks and crannies of these dream lives and dream businesses and offer lots of real talk along the way. Because to be a true leader in whatever you're endeavoring in your life and to create a legacy that you're proud of, you need a tribe lifting you up with you on the journey. And I've made it my mission to be that partner with you. Because after all, we are all in this together. By the way, if you'd like some help improving your business and life, then we just might be able to help. Head on over to dreamlifeisreallife.com to learn more about what we do and how I might be able to personally support you and just continue this conversation in making your dream life your real life. All right, let's get to it. All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we have a new guest with us, Damon Burton. Damon is a search engine marketing expert that has beat billion-dollar companies at their own game and has proven strategies to grow your business as well. He is a Forbes contributor and an Amazon best-selling SEO book author, and he helps you show up higher on Google without paying for ads. So SEO is search engine optimization, and his clients include the Utah Jazz's team store and businesses that have been featured on Shark Tank and recognized by Inc. And today he's going to help us avoid being the best kept secret and get our word, get our brand, get our programs into the Googles, right? Because we know people are searching for things that we have. Sometimes the struggle is just, showing up and being ranked and populating on that first page of Google, which I know Damon knows a thing or two about. So thanks for being here.
You bet. Thanks, Hannah. I always like the little internet jokes like the Googles. And I had a client that had, I'm going to slaughter what it was, but he had like the Twitter book or something like that, where he would just slaughter Facebook and Twitter together.
Yeah. I make they've heard this joke before because there's always new things, right? Like my prediction is one day we're all going to be hanging out at Yo Mama's house. Like, I think that's going to be Facebook, Twitter, Clubhouse, Yo Mama's house. But today we are here live in Zoom color. You might be catching us on the podcast or on Facebook. So thank you again for carving out time. I know there's a lot happening in the world in our real lives right now. But this is actually a really timely conversation around search engine optimization. Mm-hmm. In my world, okay, in my opinion, I think this is where coaches specifically need to be looking, as social media is always changing the algorithm, getting pretty noisy with everyone and their sister down the street deciding, I'm going to start an online business now that I'm just home all the time. And I really want to, hear your take on helping experts stand out and be recognized in organic search. But I have a feeling that this is not new to you. You've been in this game for more than a minute, more than quarantine. So I'd love if we could just kind of take a step back and hear how you started your entrepreneurial journey. And if you've always been doing SEO or where you're coming from.
Yeah, so I started SEO National in 2007, so we're creeping up on 15 years. And yeah, I've intentionally stayed in my lane. The first year or two, my background was originally web design, and so that's kind of how I segued into SEO. But when I first started the company, it was just myself for the first year or two, and my background being design, I mostly focus on design clients. So I have a lot of like blips on the radar that contributed to where I'm at today. So I'll try and give the abbreviated version with a little bit of details to it, but not the long exhausted version.
The highlight reel. We're all about that.
I mean, we could go back super far. Like I grew up kind of like lower middle class, and it was no big sob story or anything like that. It's just I didn't have access to, computers and things like that. So I even remember when I was in junior high, I just totally took advantage of being in typing class. And at the time it sounded kind of nerdy, and actually it probably sounds super nerdy now, but I took advantage of being able to have access to just a computer. And so I learned typing. And then as I went into high school, being able to type, then I was able to, they had this class where it was just 5 or 10 of us, real small class, where we would make the school lunch menus. And then that class progressed into doing the school district's websites. And so then I started learning HTML by hand. And that was the best thing ever, because now, even 20 something years later, back then Dreamweaver didn't exist, WordPress didn't exist. And so when you had to build a website, it was all manual. And then now, even though there's all these great tools, those tools don't know if you designed something crappy. They just do what you do, what button you tell it to, you push and tell it to do. So knowing HTML has been super awesome, because then you can kind of override things. But anyway, so I learned HTML, and then I start doing design on the side. I was like the early stage entrepreneur where I did crappy websites on the side for their neighbors, friends, cousins, and everybody knew somebody that did websites. And so I was able to do that long enough where I was able to build up a skill set. Now, where it starts to transition into a career is I started a car enthusiast website, and that car enthusiast website ended up getting a lot of traction. And so then I said, well, how do I make this better? And that's really where I started to dial in my skill set of design. And then as that audience and community grew, then I said, how do I monetize this? And that's how I started to get into marketing and understanding the basics of SEO. And then where it literally transitioned into a career was I had a couple clients on the side. I had a moment where I said, okay, I have, my day job is paying 50 to 60% of my bills. My side hustle is paying, somewhere around 40%, but my day job's taking up 80% of my time. So then at the time I was newly married, still married 15 years later. But we didn't have any kids. Like our debt was our home and a car. And so it was pretty minimal. We knew kids would be on the horizon. And at the time I said, okay, this seems about as safe and calculated as a risk as I'm ever going to get. And so at that point I went all in on doing my own thing. And it sucked to lose that 50, 60% of income from your day job, but it freed up 80% of my time. And so I was able to make that income back in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, I want to say it was like within 2 months, but it was forever ago. So then, and I wasn't making a ton of money at the time. I think I was making like 20, 25 grand a year from my side hustle, and then another 30 grand for my day job. So I cut that in half, and then was able to recoup it and get back to around 50 grand within 2 months. So that was enough that I could pay my bills and then keep doing this thing. And then I went through this evolution of like, okay, this is cool. I'm self-employed and I'm 20 something. I can drink a beer at 9 o'clock in the morning if I want, and this is good enough for me. And so I did that for about a year. And then after that, I realized the opportunity that I had in front of me. And so I started to get a little, it wasn't that I ever wasn't serious, but I started to be more formal with it. Yeah. And then that's when I brought on a team member or two. And then kind of fast forwarding to where we're at now, we have, as of now, I think we have 33 employees. And I say that with hesitancy because at the beginning of the year, we had about 15. In March 2021, we were at 20. And in March alone, I hired 10. And so we went from 20 to 30 in March. And then I've since hired a handful more. And I just put out a listing for a couple new copywriters today. So, wow. Yeah. It's been a lot of quick growth, and there's been learning curves in between. And we'll maybe talk about what helped scale that, but that's kind of the crash course of where we're at today and how we got here.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I would love to talk a little bit about scaling specifically because something I'm noticing about your story is starting in 2007, taking a risk that year or 2008 with the economic recession that was very real. And now here we are in whatever the hell 2020 was, and you're coming out, stronger and, exponentially growing your business. So is that ironic that you really grew in low economic times, or what do you notice about when the economy gets shaky for your business?
Well, I can put a finger on it now. When 2020 first started, so here's been the evolution of my perception of this, and it's a great question because I've talked about it before, but it's just come up in conversation, but nobody's pointed it out like you have. And so when I went through 2008, when I look back at that, obviously I understand what happened to the world and the impact, but for just me as an isolated person, I have zero bad memories from that time. And what I contributed it to at that point was transparency and just being honest with your clients. And my response when other people would, like pre 2020, where I was able to add that second chapter to this story, and people would say, "Wow, you started a business right before the recession. How did that go?" My response was, "Well, I think that people wanted to two things. One, they wanted people that they could trust, right? They needed to make sure their dollar was going somewhere safe. But then they also wanted that dollar to be amplified because they had to take that dollar away from, print ads or, paid AdWords. This was before really social media ads was super big. And so they had to kind of protect that dollar. And any sales engagement that I went into, including today, which I'll elaborate on in a minute, is I never sell, I educate. I will not only tell them the advantages of what we do, I will also tell them the disadvantages. And I think that earns a lot of trust and respect. And then they're able to feel more comfortable passing you that dollar. And so I set expectations, pre-sales, in the client launch, post sales. Like my main goal is to always be communicating and setting expectations, because the only time you're going to have a shitty business deal is when you didn't ask the right questions or the client didn't ask you the right questions. But both of those scenarios, it's your responsibility to figure out what those answers are. So that was kind of the answer before. And then with 2020, I think it just solidified it.
Yeah.
Because where we're at now is, starting it in 2007, like I said earlier, it was just kind of a one-man show for a while. So I don't have I can't, it's not apples to apples for me to say we grew then and we grew now. It's true. But then it was like, I went from me to one or two other employees. And then now I'm adding multiples by the month. So, but it's the same contributing factor is transparency and setting expectations. And right before we hit record, we were talking about how 10 minutes before I jumped on this recording, I was on a onboarding call with a new client. And so this new client, they're part of a $1 billion company. And we got talking about what they provide is they provide like a pre-sales solution. And what they do is their ideal customers, like tech companies, and tech companies have to sell their software. And what they did is they went through like this big, like discovery phase where they said, okay, as you sell a customer, do we create super polished, high-tech, high-def videos, or do we do the raw, quote unquote, crappy selfie videos with your phone? And he had the data to prove that the latter is better. It was a 3x better conversion rate, better sales, better retention. And his words were the ums and buts. Like the ums and the buts in your delays and your stutters and your authenticity, it's relatability. Like you're a real person.
Yes.
And so taking his data point of 3x better conversion, that's exactly my entire business model. I've never spent $1 on advertising. And all of our sales come from two places. One has historically been referrals from existing clients and, performance. But what's outpaced that, referrals haven't slowed down one bit, but what's matching and outpacing it this year is social proof. And it's very simple. It's me on LinkedIn going, here's an SEO problem. Here's the solution. Here's a pain point. Here's how to solve it. And when I talk about it, I don't send them to a landing page. I don't send them to an email list. I don't have a funnel. And the reason why this works is because you establish a relationship with your audience subconsciously, and then you stay top of mind. And so almost every single sales call I have now is they've already been exposed to the product. They're already familiar with our ethics and our transparency. And then when I get on that, quote unquote sales call, it's, I already know what you do. How do we start?
Yeah. They're ready for the solution. They're ready for the solution. Yeah. I'm jotting down some notes here because I think there's a few things that you said are really powerful for this current environment of consumerism. I totally agree with you that there's this hesitancy or this craving for authenticity and personal connection. We're seeing celebrities or like these bigger name organizations like lowering their prices and changing how they engage with their audience, because we are like looking for, who do we trust? Whether it's conscious or subconscious, this is uncertain times. You're sick of hearing it, but it's impacting the way that your prospects are watching you. So this matters that it's still uncertain times. And so what you're saying, Damon, about, never selling, just educating, and even calling out the disadvantages, not just the problems you solve, but what disadvantages there might be to having a website or having SEO, to show that you're not just out here with smoke and mirrors trying to be the magician with all the answers, but staying in your lane, being honest. And I think that's really magnetic, and probably why you keep getting referrals, because you're just transparent and in integrity, and stay in your lane. So are there like any frameworks or concrete examples or templates you may be able to share with other businesses when they're thinking about, how do I just educate? How could I bring some of the disadvantages into my marketing or into my conversations?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind, and then I'll give you a story of how one of these approaches led to a lead, which became a client, which then became a second client, which then sent a third client, which was the jazz that you mentioned. So there is a template, but there's not, because part of it of transparency is you're just transparent. And so if you frame it in a certain approach, you lose a little bit of that. So it sounds cliche, but it's as simple as give without expecting anything in return. So when I get on, like, LinkedIn is my platform of choice where I get the biggest exposure. But what's interesting about me converting leads off LinkedIn is I get the visibility on LinkedIn, but they will follow me over and convert on Facebook. And so what happens is I've just built up a large enough audience to get the visibility on LinkedIn. I think I'm up to 24,000 followers, something like that. And so every time I make a post, part of it is consistency. And so I get on there Monday through Thursday, Monday through Friday, and I always have a post. And so part of that, so I'm going to give you my template. This doesn't necessarily apply to everybody, but this will hopefully, you'll be able to cherry pick from it. So Monday through Thursday, Monday through Friday, I get on LinkedIn and I make a post. And each post is always about, here's a problem, here's the solution. Or it's a little bit of, sometimes I'll talk about my appreciation for my wife and my kids. So for on LinkedIn, it's like 80-20, 80% business, 20% personal. On Facebook, it's about 50-50. Now, when I post on LinkedIn, I've narrowed it down to the time, the window of the day where I get the most visibility. And for me, it's between 6:30 and 7:30 a.m. And my theory behind this is why that works so well, because if I post an hour sooner or an hour later, my visibility is like half. And what I mean for my visibility is most of my posts average 4,000 to 10,000 views within a 24-hour period. And if I post that just 1 hour different, it's going to be 1,000 views, which is still amazing, but it's a huge gap. And so my theory why is that, I'm located in Utah. So if I post around that time, that means that the West Coast is just waking up, and the East Coast is past their commute. They've had their coffee. They're now sitting at their desk, ready to waste time for 20 minutes. And so I have no data to back it up, but there's my answer. So I get out there and I make the post, and then I'll engage with other people's content as well. And then that will amplify my visibility by, interconnecting those engagements. So then here's what happens is I stick to that approach. And then I probably get 1 to 2 leads a week out of that. And then what happens is they're pre-qualified. They already know what I do. They already trust me. We jump on a Zoom call. And then, like you said earlier, it's not really negotiations. It's how do we start? But what's interesting about what I made about the Facebook comment is it seems like I get the exposure on LinkedIn. Then they want to go, I want to find out more about Damon. And then they go to Google.
This is what people do now. Okay. It's not just like, oh, I meet you on one platform and nice to meet you. It's like, fingers go right to Google, right? And we're looking for anything and everything. So that makes a lot of sense that they're finding you in other platforms after seeing you or hearing your name.
Yeah, especially with you talking about your type of audience that listen to this podcast. I mean, anytime you have like a personal product or your name is tied to the brand, or you're a coach or a consultant, people want to qualify or disqualify you. So it doesn't matter how they may not find you on Google, but they are going to convert from Google. So like if you go search Damon Burton, you're going to find all sorts of stuff. You're going to find my social media stuff. You're going to find my blog, but then you're also going to find case studies. You're going to find things I've written on Forbes. You're going to find things I've written on Thrive. And so it's just a level of validity that you can't produce through social media, because those are more, even though I wrote those things on those other websites, they're kind of third-party references. Because when you're on social media, we all know it's the highlight reel and the humble brag, but when you see it in print on a respectable outlet, it adds another layer of credibility. So then we get the lead, we have the call converts, but that's not where it stops. So what happens after that to continue fueling this fire is I don't stop with the transparency and setting expectations. So when we have the lead call, I tell them, here's a good example of the disadvantages of working with us. The only disadvantage to SEO is that it takes time, but I'll explain why it takes time, because a lot of them will hear, well, do I really have to wait a year for SEO? Yes, but here's why. Because we're 4 to 6 weeks into it just to do the research to make sure we're building the foundation for the right approach. Then we got to start writing content, and that's going to take a couple of weeks. Then we have to send it to you to approve it. You're going to take a couple of days to get back to us. Then we push it out to Google. We have to wait for Google to find it. And then we have to repeat that. And the logistics behind creating that much content just is a grind. So I communicate that, but then I also communicate to them, guess what? I know you're going to pay me a couple $1,000s a month, but you don't get my cell phone number, and you're not going to call me on weekends. And our office is shut off after 5:00. And I only check my emails once a day. And so I set those expectations. And here's what's important for the listeners is a lot of time people will say, well, do you lose business over that? As far as I know, no. Actually, I could probably say I do. But the business I lose, I don't want that client. And anytime there's a little bit of a potential that client is going to be needy,
yes,
it always ends up being true. Like I don't let it happen often, but I just let one slip through about 6 weeks ago, and I let them go 2 weeks later. So no matter how many times I told them in the meetings, it's in our contract. I wish I had it to show you on screen. In our contract, it has historically said like, we're not available after hours, this and that. After that client that I let go last month, I revised that, and the biggest heading in that entire agreement literally says, we made this text big for a reason. Read it. And then right below that, it says everything we talked about. We're not available on weekends, after hours. Here's how you get a hold of us. Email is preferred. Here's our schedule.
Boundaries, Damon. So freaking powerful. It's so true that those difficult clients will take up 80% of your energy and your effort and probably get like 20% of the results and be, there's that 80-20 rule that you're talking about with like content is so true with clients too. And I just like so resonating because this boundaries conversation keeps coming up in so many places. And if you want to grow big, and I think this is probably directly related to your ability to scale, because if you want to grow tall and mighty and keep, scaling, if you have leaky boundaries at the bottom and you have these like sneaky clients coming in on Sundays, taking your energy, pulling your focus with the phone call, all that stuff, like it's impossible to build that next layer. So yeah, I think that like the bold contract and the having clear expectations of your clients, it's almost like you've flipped the script and you're the one hiring the clients.
For sure. Yeah. And it's not weird unless you make it weird. Like, where it's going to be weird is when they try to call you on a Friday and they can't get a hold of you. And then they don't hear from you Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then Monday you're like, oh, sorry. That's when it's going to be weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a client once who sent me something on the weekends. I didn't have good boundaries and I sent something short back and he was really upset. And I was like, yeah, sorry, man, I don't usually work on weekends. I just, sent you something quick when I was in the car. And he's like, I would have rather you sent nothing and just let me know that or gotten to it on Monday. But like your short comment and then nothing else the rest of the weekend really left him hanging. And that was really powerful feedback a few years ago to be like, yeah, I should have just said like, I'm not getting back to this. I'm off.
It's setting expectations goes so far. What's interesting is I had a lead call yesterday. And so I wrote a book last year and one of the chapters is dedicated to just this. It is all the things that could get me fired. And I put it in the book and I'm like, here are, I think the list is 25 questions long. Here are 25 questions to weed out a bad SEO company. And so the lead call yesterday was awesome because he goes, hey, I got your book right here. And so he had read it is why he reached out to me. And so he was, he was joking, but serious. And he's like, so I got your book here and I made a bunch of highlights and I'm on the chapter about questions and I'm going to go through and ask you like half of these questions. But that's the beauty about being transparent is you got nothing to hide. I mean, I can put my head down and fall asleep in 90 seconds because I have such a clean conscience. I don't have to worry about where our sales are coming from. I don't have to worry about like how we're engaging with those clients. I don't have to worry if I left anybody hanging. I don't have to worry about performance because like there's just so many other benefits to transparency beyond just contributing to the bottom line. So I told you there's a story. So I'll give you the story. I made a post. This was a couple of years ago. I made a post on LinkedIn and a gentleman reached out and said, hey, we're shopping around SEO companies. So this was like a tech company. Most of my clients are not local. This guy happened to be local. And so he says, hey, we're 10 minutes away. Can we meet up sometime? So I went in and had one of the big fancy meetings with all the head honchos. And then one of the marketing managers had made a comment. This is kind of like a side funny note. One of the marketing managers made a comment that he had like a late night. And so I brought a pillow and a coffee for him just to add some personality. Now, of course, he's not going to lay his head down on the pillow, but then he goes, Damon's paying attention, right? And so it's just those little human engagements that add up. So we have this conversation. We go through the presentation. And again, it's like, here's not only the advantages, but the disadvantages. The main one being SEO takes time. So you have to have cash flow to invest over that time without getting a return until later. And so they called me, I want to say it was within 24 hours. And they said, hey, you know what was cool about you coming in is that you don't often leave a marketing meeting usually you leave a marketing meeting more confused, but you came in and not only, you didn't sell us, you educated us, told us the advantages, told us the disadvantages. So they ended up closing the deal. So now we got client number one. Well, client number one, we had only been working for 2 weeks before they said, hey, I can already see the level of professionalism, the communication, setting expectations. I already trust you enough to send you a referral. And so client number one sends a lead within 2 weeks. Now, I just got done telling you it takes a year for us to drive results, and he's already confident enough in us to send a lead after 2 weeks without seeing any results yet. So then he sends the lead, go through the same engagement. These guys become a client. This client was under contract for 1 week. And 1 week later, they said, hey, I'd like to introduce you to the Utah Jazz. So at that point, of course, I go, yes. But then I also go like, who the hell are you? Because it was in a completely unrelated business that he's going to, introduce the Jazz. Well, this gentleman ended up being the exiting vice president of retail sales. And so part of his last responsibilities were to fill in the marketing roles. And so from one post on LinkedIn, we ended up closing the Jazz. So from one post on LinkedIn in 4 to 5 weeks, from one post, we got 3 clients.
Yeah. That's the power of people, right? We think we're like putting this out to hack the algorithm, when it's really about like just connecting with people and being a human out there. So I think there's just so much there that people can take away when they're thinking about, making moves either in their content or their networking, is just like bringing that layer of honesty and transparency and even calling out some of the disadvantages. Maybe it takes a long time. Maybe they need to get out of their comfort zone. If you're a coach, what are some of those things that might hold some people back, but would qualify others to be ready to invest, ready to commit, for the long term of your type of contract. And I want to transition now into more specifics about SEO, because so much of what you're saying has been true for me. I started working and implementing SEO in my business about 3 years ago, and more than that now. 4 years ago, about 3 years ago, I started getting traction, and I started getting clients like a year and a half after that. And now we're to the place where people send me really interesting opportunities to speak or to affiliate a program because my website has traffic. But I didn't think about it. I had a woman doing it. I had no idea what she was doing until it started to work, and I started getting curious. So I'd love to talk a little bit about, the general idea of SEO, search engine optimization. Like, give us the 4th grade overview really quick.
Yeah. So the goal is to show up higher on search engines, but without paying for ads. So you're not buying your position. What you're doing is increasing the credibility of your website to show up higher organically. Now, what's interesting about that is that the paid ads can technically show up higher, but the non-paid results have substantially more reach. So depending on the search query, it could be anywhere from 10 to 100 times more click on the organic, even though the paid ads is showing up higher, because people get what's called banner blindness. The majority of us know those are ads, and we just go right past them. So if you think about how Google's income, it may have changed by now, but it's somewhere around 90% of their income is from paid ads. Now, if you think about how gigantic Google is, and the biggest chunk of their revenue is from paid ads, and organic fuels way more visibility than what can fund a giant like Google, there's a huge market out there. So the way that SEO works, there's a ton that goes into it, but everything primarily falls into 2 categories. So one category is what you do on your website, and the other category is what you do externally to your website. And then kind of in between that, you have content, because you can have content internally and externally. But basically what you're trying to do is increase the efficiency of your website so it loads quickly, is mobile friendly, and has relevant content. And then what a lot of people are surprised to learn is that the site structure is the minority of SEO these days. It's like ground zero, you do it. But then after that, it's the content and external credibility. But the content and external credibility is only going to be effective if you have that solid foundation for it to bounce off of. So it's basically, that's why it's a long-term play, right? You can fix the structure of your website within a couple of days, couple of weeks. But then you got to figure out how to improve the credibility and bring something unique to the marketplace. Because unless you're talking about in your blog and your videos about unique perspectives and unique content, you're not going to rank uniquely. How many times has the topic of mindset and coaching just been beat up, right? So unless you can come to the market with something unique, you're not going to show up uniquely. So really, it's just, an interesting way to simplify how SEO works is it's just who makes Google look good. Because Google wants to show the websites that have the best user experience with the best content to solve the searcher's question. So that's why those things we touched on matter. Good page speed matters because Google doesn't want to send somebody to a brutally slow website. Good design and user experience matter because they don't want to send somebody to a website and then the customer doesn't like it, and then that looks poorly on Google. So if you can just simplify a good user experience and good content for the user, which then makes Google look good, Google will return the favor and give you more visibility.
Yeah. It's connecting people who are searching for specific things to the answer, right? I think that's like a really great way to sum up search engine optimization and definitely make Google look good. And I think for the coach or for the business owner, there's a huge benefit in being that answer, being that succinct, clear, easy to access answer. Sets you up as an expert. Right? If I type into Google and then I land on the expert telling me, there's a huge trust factor for me as a prospect or me as someone that might be looking for the answers that a coach or a consultant or an entrepreneur has. So if you were talking to a coach or a consultant, what are the advantages and disadvantages that you would lay out for them if they're considering SEO and, making their website be that resource that you just mentioned?
Really, the only disadvantage for any potential someone investing in SEO, whether you're a coach or you're a retail provider or a service provider, is just going to be that time. So do you have the patience and the cash flow to cover that investment until it starts driving a return? That's really the only disadvantage. If you think about comparing it to, paid ads, that's the easiest comparison. Is the advantages and disadvantages are nearly directly opposite. So the disadvantage to SEO is time. The advantage to paid ads is time, because you can get a paid ad up and running in a day. The advantage to organic, though, is better buyer intent, because with paid ads, you're stereotyping your potential buyer. With organic, you are relating and resonating to the potential buyer.
They find you a lot of times too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they have to find you because they had the intent to go search something. So that implies better buyer intent, because with any sort of paid ads, you may be able to stereotype them a little bit, but you're going to be interrupting them. You have some sort of interruptive based marketing with the paid ad. You're the shiny object at the checkout stand. But with organic, they were very specifically looking for something. And then especially with the coaches, one of the advantages is like, you are the coach. And so to kind of compare that to my business, I run a team. And so even though I'm not the single product, what's interesting is why the approaches we've talked about work so well for me is people may pay my company, but they chose to buy because of me. And so if you compare that to the coaches, that's a win-win in both scenarios, because they buy because of you and they pay you. And so if I can scale a company like this in an indirect way where I'm not the final product, but for the listeners, they can take the same approach and they are the final product, that goes to show even more so that this approach could work even better for a direct, you being the direct product.
Yeah. Yeah. That personal brand piece absolutely is important to coaches. And kind of coming back to something I said at the beginning, I really think SEO is that key in the lock of being that best kept secret, because with social media and paid ads, literally anyone and their sister down the street can put out stuff, can claim things, can get in front of lots of people, but they don't always have the things to back it up, right? And I think that the established coaches, the ones who have a lot of experience and are like, actually coaching, like that's what they're doing day to day is like this work. They aren't out there making reels and hashtagging and hacking the algorithm. So SEO is that thing that you can delegate to bring qualified eyeballs to the great value that you have, and articulating that in a website and through blogs and through articles are going to speak to those people who are really looking for the value that so many experts have, but don't have the energy to go make into a tweet 7 times a day. Right.
There's a couple of things you just said. So one thing is with an approach to SEO is you own that asset. Now, obviously you don't own Google, but you own and control the website that Google can point to. With Facebook, you don't own Facebook, and your profile can get shut off at any moment. And especially if you're doing paid ads, that's like a brutal reality on almost a nearly a weekly basis. Now, the other, you're talking about, we'll just kind of say fake gurus, right? Because they can just get in on any platform. And it's like the loudest gets the most attention. And kind of like a side note, what's been interesting as I've become acquaintances with other successful entrepreneurs, the quietest ones are the most successful, because they don't have the time to go be yelling and screaming, like I said, hashtagging on every platform every day. One thing that drove me nuts when Clubhouse just started to blow up for a while is that screamed. There's obviously a ton of great people on Clubhouse, but what stuck out more for me is the lack of inauthenticity. And at the beginning, people said Clubhouse was great for the opposite. They said because it's raw and it's real time and it's not the fakes. and for me, it was the opposite. I just saw a bunch of people screaming the loudest are who the ones that got the traction on Clubhouse. And to kind of maybe make more sense is there was more than one time where I would go listen in on a Clubhouse room, and there was half a dozen people that I would follow on Facebook, and they are completely contradicting themselves. One would say that they're in the 7-figure whatever room. And then the next day on LinkedIn, I'd see them say they just had their first 5-figure month. And you cannot get 7 figures at 5 figures a month. So to kind of come full circle, like, you have control over being able to provide more valuable, evergreen, longer lasting content that provides more credibility by controlling your website than you do with a fly-by-night social media platform that you don't own that may go away tomorrow.
Absolutely. I think that's just a really clear takeaway for folks. Whether you have a website or not, thinking about starting to invest in the longer play to establish yourself as a credible expert who has the value and resources that people are looking for is going to be beneficial for any business, and not just this year or whatever, this platform. But, I definitely see this being the long-term thing that sticks, that's going to help those experts stand out. So, Damon, if folks want to continue this conversation with you, learn more about who you're beating in the SEO game, things like that, where can they jump? Is it your LinkedIn or your website to stay connected with you?
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn. You can get a hold of me directly pretty easily that way. And then if you want to learn more about SEO, I have a free copy of my book at freeseobook.com. And to kind of add to that, if you go to that page, you just get the book. Like on the thank you page, it invites you to our Facebook group. There's no upsell. Like I said, I don't do anything with any sort of list. So that just kind of is a good ending point where at every opportunity, I try to, like we said earlier, just give without expecting anything in return.
Amazing. We'll make sure that we have links and they can, of course, find you at damonburton.com. Thank you so much for bringing so much value to us. And listeners, I'll be back next week with another inspiring guest that will help you make your dream life and business a reality. And don't forget to hop on over to dreamlifeisreallife.com/show for specific goodies that we talked about today and access to continue the conversation with these guests as well as myself. I cannot wait to see what you create. Until next time.